Because the reality is for women, we have chosen skinny over strong our whole lives. We've tried to make our bodies smaller our whole lives. Every woman out there knows what I'm talking about because it's like, I'll say, take creatine. Oh, I'll get bigger. Our whole lives we're like shrinking. And I think that if you can start to go, what is it that I want to be able to do in my 70s and my 80s and my 90s? Not these ridiculous things of like, I'm going to live to 180. No, I mean, come on. What do you want to be able to do in your 90s?
I'm Dr. Esra Çavuşoğlu, and I've been living a sober life for the past 18 years. My battle with addiction drove me to seek new methods, devices, and supplements to improve my physical and mental performance, enhance my quality of life, and ultimately live healthier for longer. From my experiences in addiction recovery, biohacking, and longevity to the latest global developments, from groundbreaking entrepreneurs to expert academics, the conversations I've had over the years are now featured weekly on Soberhead Podcast. Today, I have the great honor of having legendary JJ Virgin at Soberhead Podcast. With over 40 years experience as triple board certified nutrition expert and fitness hall of famer, JJ has multiple New York Times bestseller and two-multimillion-dollar businesses. She became an idol over the years, and practicing what she teaches made a huge difference on me. JJ is a passionate advocate of nutrition's healing power, and her mission is to start a movement of women choosing to age powerfully. After decades of watching women strive to shrink themselves, JJ is urging women to step into their power, physically and personally. Using her principles of powerful aging, she inspires women to get strong, get bold, and get what they want in life. I'm super excited for this interview and have no doubt we all will learn a lot. Now, let's go to the episode. Here is something that is fascinating. A huge amount of people who watch this channel frequently are not subscribed. So I want to ask you a quick favor. When you subscribe, it helps us to make the show better, access to the world-leading experts, and ultimately bring you more value. All that I ask is for you to hit the subscribe button, and in return, I promise we will make Ayık Kafa better every day. Welcome, JJ Virgin, to Soberhead Podcast.
Good to be here.
I'm so thrilled that you're here. I've been following your work for 10 years plus. To begin with, you were very famous with the Virgin diet.
Yes.
It was just all about JJ Virgin diet.
Which the publishers didn't want me to call it the Virgin diet.
And then, since this longevity craziness started, suddenly you are like, aging gracefully. I don't know how I'm going to even translate into Turkish.
There must be that word in Turkish.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, aging gracefully, let's age powerfully. So that was your new message. And I probably watched every podcast you were on because it's hilarious. I learn a lot. And between you, Dr. Stacy Sims, and Dr. Wanda Wright, that message to women that you need to be strong, you need to lift weight, you need to eat protein, really got me. And I changed my life. And last time, actually, when I saw you...
You're looking great. Look at your arms.
I've been lifting heavy.
It shows.
Eating a lot of protein. Where does this message come? Age powerfully.
It came to me as I was unpacking this. First of all, of course, I'm obsessed about aging powerfully. I turned 60 wonderful. I was like, if this was my 30s, I would be like, who cares about that? But, now I care. Because I think we always build a brand around the thing we want ourselves, right? Don't we do that? So I was really unpacking the whole aging thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm an exercise physiologist. That's where I started. That's most of my graduate and doctoral work's in exercise science. And I started to really look at, what happens as we age? Because you hear all these miserable statistics, right? As you age, starting at around age 30, you start to lose up to 1% of our muscle each year and 2 to 4% of our strength and 6 to 8% of our power. And the weirdest thing happened to me a couple years ago. I was trying to get the lid off a jar and I couldn't do it. And I didn't think much about it the first time, but about the third time, I'm like, what is going on here? Because I've always been strong. And grip strength is a great proxy for overall strength. And so I'm like, am I losing it? And, if you really unpack what happens as we age, the biggest thing we lose are what are called fast twitch muscle fibers. Now, we have slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers, and then we have these fibers that can become whichever one we need them to be. They're hybrid. And slow twitch is the stuff that's helping me sit upright right now, that helps you walk around, do easy activities of daily living. Fast twitch is the lift heavy things, do powerful movements, move fast, have agility. If you think about it, so many people, as they age, the message out there is, okay, well, don't try to do the things you used to do when you were younger, right? Just, do easy stuff, walk, do Pilates. Well, the bummer with that is if you focus on those types of activities and not hard activities, powerful strength building activities, you actually are going to take those in-betweener fibers and make them more slow twitch. So as we age, we lose fast twitch muscle fibers as part of aging, although I would say that we can really minimize that. And if we're not actively doing the things to build those fast twitch, the things we are doing are going to make more slow twitch. So we're just becoming slower. And you see it as people age, right? Their gait speed slows down. They can't open the jars. So that's where aging powerfully came from, is really, what do we need to focus on as we age? We need to focus on doing hard things, working in power movements, that type of stuff. And then it became a bigger idea, because the reality is, for women, we have chosen skinny over strong our whole lives. We've tried to make our bodies smaller our whole lives. Every woman out there knows what I'm talking about, because it's like, I'll say, take creatine. Oh, I'll get bigger. I'm like, our whole lives we're like shrinking. And, as I started to talk about becoming more powerful and putting on more muscle, the big pushback I got was, I don't want to get bigger. And I'm like, you know what? First of all,
I was one of them. I was one of them.
Well, here's the funny thing. Muscle's metabolic Spanx. It holds everything in tighter. But the other part of that, as I'm telling people, oh, you're not going to get bigger, then I had kind of a moment where I went, get bigger, man. If you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? This is your time in life to show up powerfully. The world needs the matriarchs, right? The world needs us to step up, show up, be powerful. And if you're not going to do that in your 50s and 60s, where are you going to wait till 90 and go, okay, it's my time to roar? I don't think so.
I think the fear of getting big, I can only speak of my experience. I think if you have fat and if you add muscle on top, then you look big. Things shifted for me when I lost the fat. And then when I started building, then I don't get big. I mean, I get muscly, but I don't get big. It's not like I'm tight in my jeans and stuff. So I think the trick is also being able to lose that fat.
Well, the reality is this. It is like watching grass grow to put muscle mass on your body. You would be lucky if you could put a pound of muscle on. Now, contrast that with, you could lose, pound or two of fat every week. So if you are doing the right things, you can be losing fat, building muscle, and making this entire body composition change called recomping. If you go and when I was in grad school, we literally were told, don't let anyone lift the weights till they lose the weight. We were taught this, that you had to do cardio first, lose the weight, and then start doing weight training. I completely disagree with that idea, because let's say that you say, okay, I'm going to calorically restrict and do a lot of cardio so I can lose weight. Well, you will, but you'll also lose muscle. Mm-hmm. If concurrently you up your protein, you start lifting heavy things, now you can hold on to, or better yet, build muscle as you're losing fat. And that muscle ensures that you don't trash your metabolism and cause metabolic adaptation, where you end up with a slower metabolic rate after the diet, than it should be. If you lose weight, your metabolic rate is going to go down. But if you lose most of that weight from fat and put on some muscle, you won't have as big of an effect. And that way, you're going to minimize that chance that you lose a bunch of fat and muscle and then gain fat back, and do that over and over again until you totally, destroy your metabolism.
Now that you said about this, lose fat, gain muscle, what do you think of the GLP-1 diets? People are using these injections.
I am a big proponent of GLP-1s.
Me too.
I am not a big proponent of GLP-1s done without the appropriate diet and lifestyle. And in fact, if I was a benevolent world dictator, what I would do is I would say, in order for you to qualify to use this, the first thing you have to do is track your food, eat protein first, and make sure you're getting at least a gram of protein per pound of target body weight. Once we know you got that and you're starting to do some resistance training, then we will give you the GLP-1. And we'll see the least amount of dose that we need to do to drop the inflammation, improve the insulin sensitivity, and shut down the food noise a bit. Ultimately, we're using the GLP-1 to pull you out of the metabolic hole that you're in, because if you've been stuck in a weight loss cycle for a long time where you just can't seem to lose weight or you lose and gain, you've damaged your metabolism. And what these drugs can do is give you kind of a life raft to get you out of that situation, right? And start to heal your metabolism. But you can't do that in a vacuum. You've got to be doing the other stuff alongside it. And where they're getting the bad rap is because they are not being given correctly. They're being too high of a dose without those lifestyle interventions.
You know, it's full disclosure. I have a client, a patient that the other day called me. I have a couple of pounds. I want to lose it. Can I use, I think it was Munjaro. The full disclosure is I learned from you in one of the podcasts when I listened, and I said, yes, you can use, but you have to do strength training and you have to eat a lot of protein. And she was very happy. So I just spread the message.
Well, it's interesting too, is the information coming out now about all sorts of addiction and the use of these drugs, like shopping addictions, alcohol, that this may not just shut off a little bit of the food noise. It's potentially doing something with dopamine so that you don't have the noise at all.
Sure.
So could be interesting. We'll see.
So you also are very strong on protein. Eat protein, a lot of protein, eat protein first. What's your message to people?
It's funny. I don't see it as a lot of protein. I'm always amazed when people are like, I can't eat that much protein. And I'm watching them and I'm like, well, I can't eat as much carbs and fat that you just put away, So maybe if you just ate the protein first, you wouldn't be filled up on the bread and the pasta and all the other stuff that you ate. So when you look at it, the one common thing, like you can manipulate fats and carbs. And in fact, you can live without carbohydrates. We can't live without protein or fat or water. You can live without carbs. I wouldn't say that it's the optimal because I want the fiber and the polyphenols for your gut microbiome. So that means that protein is like the thing we really should build our diet around. When you look at most diets out there, they're like, they never really even talk about protein. It's either, go high carb or go high fat. And protein's kind of like this side thing people don't think about. When you look at protein, if you just made this shift where you focus on eating protein first at optimal amounts, basically that gram per pound of target body weight. So here's what happens. If all you did was take some of the calories that you're eating away from carbohydrates and fat and move them over to protein, initially you will start to lose weight. But a couple other important things happen. Number one, we know that protein's the most thermic of the macronutrients: protein, fat, carbs, and alcohol. Fat requires basically nothing to be metabolized, and carbohydrates require about 5 to 10% of those calories to be metabolized. So if you eat 100 grams of carbohydrates, you're getting about 90 to 95 calories. With protein, it's 20 to 30% of those calories are used in the digestion and assimilation of protein. So if you eat 100 grams of protein, you are only getting somewhere in the, 70, 80 calories. And here's what's also cool is carbs and fat, we have storage depots for them. We have kind of endless supply where we can put fat. Carbohydrates can either be stored in our muscles as glycogen for fuel source, or they can be converted to fat and stored as fat. Now, protein, yes, protein could become glucose and then it could be stored as glycogen or could be stored as fat, but that's a very, very convoluted process to do that. For the most part, protein's being used as a building block to regenerate, to renew, right? It's not being used for fuel. So I call it more of a function macronutrient. So that's the first thing. The second thing with protein is when you eat more protein in caloric restriction, it helps you hold on to lean body mass. Third thing is protein's more satiating or more satisfying than any of the other macronutrients. So when you eat protein, slows down stomach emptying, activates GLP-1, and also provides the essential amino acids to make the neurotransmitters that really help satisfy the cravings. I find so often, I wrote a book about sugar and helping people get through their sugar cravings. And the biggest thing I found was that people just needed to eat more protein. If they ate the protein, they didn't have the sugar cravings, right? There's an interesting hypothesis that showed that if we are left to our own devices and we were eating a low-protein diet, we will continue to overeat until we get enough of the essential amino acids we need. It's called the protein leverage hypothesis. And so the reality is just eat it first, and then you won't have that issue. And if you do, the studies show you tend to make better food choices overall. So I always start with what's one thing you can do, very low-hanging fruit, that will make a big difference in your diet. And one thing, and I especially love if it's something you can add before you even start to think about taking other things away. So if all we thought of right now is you have to eat protein first, you need to get at least 30 grams at each meal. I think 40 to 50 is probably better. And then go and eat your non-starchy vegetables, eat some healthy fats, and then go eat whatever else you're going to eat. You won't. You'll be full, right?
But it's the contrary. You go to a restaurant, they bring the bread and the butter and then the appetizer. I'm like the very odd person among my community because I don't eat much carb. I wasn't eating so much protein in the past. After menopause, everything shifted. And then I said that I really like my protein now because it keeps me full, like you said. And I don't feel the need of nibbling on other stuff. Like I eat, right. I'm full, I'm good. But I see people like, eating everything and anything. And then that's it. They don't continue to the good part of the meal.
Right. I've literally heard people say, well, how do you eat that much protein? I don't know how you do it. And then I'll go to dinner with them and watch them. And I go, well, I just watched you eat a bunch of appetizers and then a big salad that basically was a sundae because it was covered in dressing and croutons, right? And then you finally get your meal. You've already had more calories than I eat in a day and a bunch of carbs and fat. So, of course, you're full at this point.
What do you feel about these, intermittent fasting, juice fasting? Because, it messes up people's intake of the protein to begin with.
Well, so I want to break it down because I feel like all these terms get thrown around and they're sort of interchangeable. So first one would be more time-restricted feeding. Now, I want to distinguish time-restricted feeding and normal eating because I don't know what it's like where you live, but in the United States, when I was growing up, you had breakfast an hour or two after waking up. You had dinner 2 to 4 hours before bed. You had breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maybe a snack, usually not. And that was it. Then all of a sudden, in the U.S., we had this whole craze about dropping all the fat out of everything. And all of a sudden, everyone was snacking because they were hungry all the time. And then it was like vegetarian low fat was the big diet craze that really set all of these problems into motion. And all of a sudden you were eating, and the whole thing was, and I said this too, I'm so sorry to whoever I said this to, clients back then, eat within an hour of waking up. And so, you woke up, you had a bowl of cereal with non-fat milk, then you had a snack a couple hours later, like a bagel with fat-free cream cheese and a skim milk latte, and then, it went on and on and on. And then you had a snack before bed. So I think that intermittent fasting was kind of like a rebound from that insanity, right? Where it was like, all right, let's get back into reality, which is you wake up in the morning, your pancreas has got to wake up too. You don't just get up and start cranking out insulin. So give it some time. Go look at the sunlight. Give yourself an hour or two. I think 2's better. Then have breakfast. And then you want to make sure you really stop eating 2 to 4 hours before bed. And I think 4 is better than 2 if you can pull it off. Because now melatonin's coming up, cortisol's going down, pancreas going to sleep. This isn't the time that your body's going, cool, let's just throw a bunch of carbs in the mix and shoot some insulin. We don't have that. So that's the first thing is somewhere along the line, it used to be that we ate in a 10-hour window, right? You'd eat a breakfast about 8, you'd eat dinner about 6. And, maybe 12 hours. Then all of a sudden, eating within a 12-hour window became a diet. It's bizarre. I'm like, why is eating within a 12-hour window intermittent fasting? It should be normal eating. So then they did a study, and it's funny, if you hear Dr. Sachin Panda talk about it, the reason they did the study for 8 hours is because that was the constraints of the lab tech who was doing the study. His wife wanted him home for dinner. So that's why Yeah, this was why this study was done for 8 hours and it became gospel, right? So this study of compressing your feeding window down to 8 hours. Now, you hear all sorts of stuff about how this might work. The reality is it tends to kick out a meal, which could drop out some calories, which could help with weight loss. It supposedly could help with autophagy, but no one can really say when autophagy really starts to kick in, although I know the best way to trigger autophagy is to exercise, right? That's the single greatest thing you can do, just work out. You will trigger autophagy. And then, some blood sugar, insulin sensitivity, and I think those things can help here. I worry when we get down to like one meal a day or every other day fasting. Now, I'm not talking about if you're doing something therapeutically for, say, cancer. I'm talking about someone doing this because they are trying to age powerfully, build muscle. I think probably we're going to do better in an 8 to 10 hour eating window where we can get the protein in. But if you're eating 8 hours and you do 2 meals with great protein, you can pull it off. It's really what works for you. I just don't know that it's going to give you these benefits that we all think that it's going to give you.
I had Mindy Pals in the studio. She was in Istanbul and she came to the studio, so we recorded here. So I asked these intermittent fasting windows and stuff. And she says, like, most of my message is to people who has metabolically not functioning well. So to readjust their system. And then if they have some sort of illness, like you said, like cancer or other autoimmune disorders. And then she said that she's organizing her 8 hours window based on when is she going to do the workout. So she's not doing always the same thing. She moves it in the morning or towards the night.
I love Mindy, by the way. And I think if I'm going to do any kind of restriction, I personally think that we're better off doing an early intermittent fast where we eat, within like maybe if we wake up at 6, we're eating around 9, 10 at the latest. And we don't do I think that 12 noon and 8 p.m. was really a problematic situation. Because, it's too late at night, unless you're going to bed at midnight and getting up at 8, but I'm assuming you're not.
Dr. Stacy Sims, and I'm sure you follow her, and maybe she was even in your show, I'm not sure.
She was on my show, yes.
So her message is that women synthesize the protein differently, and they need to eat first thing in the morning. I'm not saying like I woke up and I have to eat, but they should not skip breakfast, and they should eat the protein right after their workout.
First of all, I think that we have to look at how do we feel the best. One of the things I feel like these diets do is they disconnect us from our own reality. And it's like, I know for me, I don't feel good when I skip breakfast. I tried working out fasted and my workout suffered. And the most important thing with a workout is the quality of the workout. People get very confused about exercising fasted as if they're going to burn more fat. And it's like, well, maybe. But the reality is if you're really working out hard, you're burning a lot more carbs than fat. And it's not the fat you're burning in the workout that makes the difference. It's the fat you're burning, when you're in a deficit and your body has to go into its stores, which likely is going to happen when you're at the lowest levels of activity, like sitting or sleeping. So that's the first part. As far as eating after workouts, a lot of Stacy's audience are athletes. And I think for the average woman that it probably doesn't make that big of a difference as to when you eat your protein. I think it's important that you have it, but we kind of now know that muscle protein synthesis goes on for longer, especially, and it depends on what types of protein you're eating, how long it is. But I'm not so concerned of, you work out and then you finish and you eat. I think that if you get up in the morning, you have breakfast, go work out a couple hours later, have lunch an hour or two later, you're all fine. What I worry about sometimes when we make these rules is that what it makes someone do is not do anything because their schedule doesn't allow for them to eat at the right time, right? And it's like, the reality is for all of this, these are the minors, not the majors. And I think one of the things we have to really focus on is majoring in the majors before we start to worry about like the minor things. And the majors are the composition of your diet, making sure you're getting enough protein, making sure that you're not eating all day long, that I think it's really important to eat more in, main meals, that you're well hydrated, because that in itself can make you store more fat and raise cortisol, that you're doing your movement and your exercise, and those are different, and that you're getting good recovery and sleep.
I listened to you once. You were talking about how you're kind of concerned about these juice fastings.
I hate juice fasts. Hate them. First of all, it's not a fast. You know, it's so ridiculous to call it a juice fast. What's a fast? A fast is when you don't eat anything. If you're drinking juice, you're not fasting, you're juicing. But I cannot do not like juice. I can see green drinks in here, but if you're going to do a green drink, what I would do is add in some fiber. So, because you're still going to get a big, fast sugar hit otherwise. Personally, I'm like, eat the vegetables and eat the fruit. I don't know, eat those and drink some water. I'm not a juice fan. This juice fasting is actually built around the idea that it's a cleanse, that's some kind of a detox. And that's what makes it even more stupid, because in order for you to detox well, it's a very nutrient-dense process. Yes, you need a lot of those antioxidants, polyphenols that you're going to get from the plants, but you also need, it's an amino acid-rich process. You need those amino acids. Once the toxins are freed up from your cells, whether that's sauna or some caloric restriction, because that's how you're going to get fat out of the fat cells, then you need to be able to have amino acids to grab a hold of those toxins so that you can then get them out of your body. It can't do it without the amino acids getting a hold of them. Otherwise, they're just there, right? They need to be transformed to be able to be eliminated. So this juice cleanse is a recipe for becoming more toxic, not less, and also hijacking your blood sugar.
Yeah, for sure. So what is your normal workout routine? I saw you a couple of times at the same gym of the hotel.
I know. I was like, you're stalking me. We just have the same schedule.
What is your workout style? Because, you know, you have great arms, obviously great legs, probably great every muscle.
Well, you're not seeing my arms because I'm cold right now, but I started lifting weights when I was 16, literally. And it was funny because I wanted to be a model back then. And I went to this modeling agency and they told me, and I know I'm the same weight and same body as back then because I fit in the same cheerleading outfit. Because it was when I went to clear out my house from when my mom passed, my husband's like, where's the cheerleading outfit? I'm like, okay, honey. So anyway, it fits. So the reality is back then I went to a modeling agency because I'm 6 feet tall and they told me I had to lose 20 pounds, which I'm 10% body fat. I'm not losing 20 pounds unless I start to lose a lot of muscle. I'm just a bigger boned, more athletic build, as I always have been. And back then when that happened, I just went, you know what? I could be strong or I could be skinny. And so I'm going to be strong. And I'm really glad I chose the strong. So I've literally been lifting weights since I was 16. There was a brief time in there when I was doing a lot of cardio, but I tend to not do a whole lot of that. That was like in my 20s. I was doing a lot of rollerblading and running and stair running, but you know, blech. So my basic routine is this, and this is what I think kind of the algorithm should be for all of us, is number one, you got to make sure you're actually moving all throughout the day. I'm always checking to make sure that I'm getting in a baseline, like 8,000 steps is absolutely the floor. One of the things I decided was next year I was going to raise the floor to 12. And I generally get about 12 to 15,000 a day. I know I can do it because I've got this walking treadmill right next to me. So I'm like, okay, got to add in more movement. And so I view walking like flossing. It's like brushing your teeth. It is not exercise. For me, exercise, you have to get hot, sweaty. It should hurt a bit. For exercise to be exercise, you're doing more than what you're used to, so your body has to adapt and get stronger. So unless you're super deconditioned, walking isn't going to be that. But walking is, we're meant to move. We're meant to just move throughout the day. So I love walking and I love walking with a rucking vest. But those, again, are foundational. Make sure you're moving all throughout the day. Don't think you can go work out 30 minutes 3 times a week, sit on your butt the rest of the time and have it work. It's not going to.
Why not?
Because when you look at your metabolism is based on 3 things. Number 1 is your basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate, how many calories you burn at rest. The only real way you can impact that, I mean, you make sure your thyroid and estrogen are working well, but the real way you impact that is by having more skeletal muscle, because we know that requires more to stay on your body. So you want to have a better resting metabolic rate, have more muscle. Then you have the metabolic effect of food. And we know that protein, having a higher protein diet, is going to give you a better thermic effect of food. But the real thing that you can do to change your metabolism, to burn more calories, is your activity level. And there's two different things for activity. There's non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and there's exercise. The reality is, if you are not being really careful about this non-exercise and tracking it, a lot of times people will go do a really hard workout, and you know what they'll do the rest of the day?
Sit.
Nothing. They do less. It's just like if we eat less calories, we tend to, our non-activity thermogenesis goes down. If we do a heavy workout, our non-exercise activity thermogenesis goes down. So I always say, first thing is, let's make sure you're actually moving more all throughout the day so that when you start to do this harder work, you don't take it out of that. You don't go all of a sudden, okay, now I'm just going to lie around the rest of the day because I'm wiped, right? So that's the first part of it. Next thing I have people do, once they know they're doing that, and that's dialed, and ideally they've added in some rucking and intensity, is I have them start doing resistance training with this idea that we are doing resistance training to get better at life, not to get better at resistance training.
That's a very important message.
I mean, you can build muscle the same on a machine versus free weights, but I know that I am not bolted to the floor. So if I want this to translate into real life, and I've loved some of the stuff I've seen on Instagram where they show the different ways that you can mimic activities of daily living. Like you think about it and go, all right, farmer's carries, where you're carrying around heavy weights. It's totally normal life, picking up heavy grocery bags and having to carry them around, or doing a deadlift or doing a squat. And I think this is important because you'll hear people say, oh, I can't squat, I have bad knees. I go, no, the real message there is I have to squat because I have bad knees. Like I blew out my knee at 17. I squatted for decades to put off having a total knee replacement that I was told I was going to have at 30 that I didn't have till I was 52. You know, I look at all of that and go, I was able to put it off because I did all the things to make sure I was as strong as possible. So, you know, check in if you're saying, no, I can't do this because of my back or my knees. I'd say, no, that's why you need to do this. You work with a physical therapist, but you need to do these things because in life we have to get up off the toilet. We have to put stuff in the overhead compartment. You know, we have to do these things, right? So you train for them so that when you get out in the wild, you don't get hurt. So resistance training is my next thing. I would, full disclosure, default to resistance training. Like I love lifting weights. I would lift weights. That would be the thing I would do. Like I have to force myself to do high intensity interval training. I did it this morning. There's all sorts of different ways to do high intensity interval training, but basically you're doing something where you do something really hard for a brief amount of time and then you actively recover. And then you do it really hard again, actively recover. And one of the key things you're doing this for is, number one, it helps your sympathetic nervous system learn how to handle stress and recover. Like that's one of the big things exercise does is teaches your body you can do hard things. But what it also does is raise lactate. And we now know that lactate is this amazing fuel source for your brain and for your heart that helps with mitochondrial biogenesis. So it makes new mitochondria. So it's like this rehab for your heart and your brain. It's incredible. So I make sure that's in fact one of my New Year's solutions. Like I'm working on what are some of the things I want to really get in place because I only do one or two at a time. Otherwise, then I don't do anything if I try to do too much. But the other one is I've been getting in my HIIT probably 2 days a week, maybe 3, but I want to up the volume on this a bit. But this morning I did high-intensity functional training. So I did up-downs, I did sprints on my sprint treadmill, I did box jumps, and I did something called Exciser, which is this little stepper with overhead press and dumbbell curls with weights. So I did 4 rounds of that, about 30 to 60 seconds for each thing. And as I was actively recovering, I did push-ups on a power plate. I did pull-ups.
That's the recovering part?
That was my recovery.
That's the recovery.
Yeah. Yes, it was. Well, because it's easier. But here's what was interesting. Like, I'm determined to do 5 sets of 10 pull-ups. So now I'm at 4 sets of 8. You know, I started at like 3 sets of 4. So I'm getting there. And I did bent over rows and overhead presses. So those were my, like overhead presses are a total recovery, easy recovery thing. Bent over rows, not so much. But that was what I did. And I just, as long as I have a board and I'm checking things off, I'll do it. I'm very goal-oriented.
So how do you stay healthy and how people can stay healthy when they travel? Because I know you travel a lot.
All the time. I travel a ton. Okay, I'll tell you a funny story. I was standing in a line at a hotel coffee bar in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I think I'd just done a talk. And so people knew who I was. So I'm standing in line. I never say a word. I figure you did not hire me, so you did not ask my opinion as to what you're ordering. Just like I'll never say a word at the gym either. I learned my lesson early on. They didn't ask you, so shut up. So I'm not saying anything. And this woman orders the latte drink that's really a milkshake and a muffin, which is really a cupcake, let's be honest. And so she orders this whole thing of this mocha latte and this big muffin. And then she looks back at me and she goes, I'm on vacation. And I'm like, look at her. First of all, I didn't say anything. I'm saying nothing. But I was like, oh, good for you. How often do you go on vacation? She goes, a couple times a month. And I'm like, that. If it was once a year, man, have the muffin. But if it's a couple times a month, we got a problem, Houston. So I look at this and I go, why would my routine be any different where I am? The one thing that I will do when I travel is I get a lot more steps in. Because, I love to explore cities by foot. So I always try to walk more. If I have to improvise, I've got my improvising things of the gym. I'm very careful about gyms. I always look at the gym before I book a hotel to make sure it's cool. And if it's not cool, that there's something nearby. But occasionally you'll go in the gym and there's, usually it's all the people walking about a mile an hour on the treadmill. But occasionally you'll go in and everyone's taken over the weight room. Whatever we were at, we had all the people that actually were using the weight room, which is then kind of frustrating. So I always have a plan B in place if things won't work out. I can do a full body weight, high intensity functional training workout, or I can go run up and down the stairs. So I'm going to do something. And we literally travel with so much stuff. We travel with a coffee maker, we travel with our supplements, we travel with food stuff. I'm getting ready to go to A4M. And, it's so hard to... It's so hard to eat in Vegas. It's so hard during the day.
Over there, it's horrible. I mean, have you been in that hotel?
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything to eat. Yeah, I mean, last year, it was oh my God, I ended up eating chocolate because I couldn't find anything to eat.
I know. Or you end up in the expo hall and you're like, oh my God, I just ate my way through the expo hall. So what I do in those situations, usually I'll get to a hotel, I will Instacart things in, so I have them in my fridge, but you can't do that in Vegas. Everything's weighted in the fridge and Instacart doesn't deliver. So I'm literally going to Las Vegas with a bunch of bars and Paleo Valley beef sticks and stuff like that. Because I was I'm just going to have to make this work. Now, the good news about that place is they have the best gym. I love the gym there. You've been to the gym there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the gym's amazing and you walk your butt off, but the food's a disaster. So I know that I'm going to dinner every single night. We're going to dinner early. So that's one way I solve it. And then I'm just going to have to do bars and shake mix and water and, paleo sticks the rest of the time. And big do.
It's the weirdest thing. You go to a health conference and it's the least healthy lifestyle over there. Every day that I'm going down and seeing people gambling and I'm passing through them and there's nothing to
smoking.
Eat. Exactly.
It's awful. I was why do we do this in Vegas, people? I would never go to Vegas, except that I have to go to Vegas for this conference. Otherwise, I would never go. Cigarette smoke, duck. We do a conference every year, and we have mastermind retreats, and literally our food's gluten-free and dairy-free. We don't use sugar. Everything is clean.
That's wonderful.
That's right. I mean, that's what people, I always go, you can eat if you're carnivore, vegan, keto, I gotcha. You're covered. You'll make it. But I just plan. I literally always have emergency food with me. I always assume I'm going to get stuck somewhere and there won't be anything. I bring a big jug so I can put water and my essential aminos and my creatine and my electrolytes in it. I travel. I do extra creatine when I'm time zone adjusting to help me deal with that. So I've got myself covered.
Does it help? Creatine?
Yes, creatine's amazing for jet lag and sleep deprivation.
So what are the supplements that you're taking?
So my core foundation are vitamin D with K. So D3K2. I'm at about 80 NGs per ml on my vitamin D now is my blood levels. Mm-hmm. I do magnesium every night, magnesium glycinate, and I do omega-3s of fish oil and EPA DHA. I do 1 to 2 grams a day of that. I take collagen, and depending on when I'm traveling too, I might bring my like I have a bone broth protein powder, I have a pea-based protein powder, so I'll bring something of that sort with me. So I use those at home and I travel with them. Sometimes I only travel with the collagen. It depends on what we're going to do. And if I can get like clean Greek-style yogurt somewhere, then I can just do that with Greek-style with collagen. I take creatine. I use a very specific creatine that I make that I worked with a company in the United States. It's the only U.S. creatine. It's a creatine HCl. It doesn't do the bloaty stuff that monohydrate does.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm taking a note. You have it under your company?
Yes, it's called Sheatine. I might even bring you some. Maybe you can figure out how to get it into Turkey. So it is the only U.S.-made creatine that doesn't bloat. So I do that. I do electrolytes. I have an electrolyte formula. I have an essential amino acid formula. I think essential aminos are one of the greatest things to travel with because you're never going to get yourself screwed. Like if you end up in a place where everything's awful, you can at least do a hit of essential aminos. And then I have a product called Sleep Candy I take at night for sleep. I take Timeline's Mitapure. I take 1,000 milligrams of that every day. I take Qualia NAD every morning. And then I also take Qualia Senolytic twice a month. And then I use Qualia Mind as well. And I use it when I feel like I should probably take it every single day, 5 days a week. I think you're supposed to take it, but I take it more like I need to focus. Oh, and I take this amazing black ginseng I got from Korea that we now ship in.
You know, my grandmother, when she died at the age of 96, and from very early on, she used to order ginseng from London, from Harrods to Turkey. Now I understand why she was so healthy and so smart and, sharp until very late in her life.
It happened last year at A4M. So here's what happened. We went to Bali on a spiritual pilgrimage, and we decided to go to South Korea before and after because the flights worked. It was like, should we go to Singapore or South Korea? We're like, we'll go to South Korea. Didn't really know anything about it, but I have a bunch of Korean friends, so they all kind of leaned in as to what we should do. Well, we get there. One of my girlfriends, Dr. Ann Shippey's like, I want to go to the Ginseng Museum. I'm like, I can't think of a more boring thing to do than that, And it's a Sunday morning. We're going to get up early and do this. But I'm like, all right, you went to the DMZ with me. I'll go to the Ginseng Museum. Well, we get there. It's my husband and Dr. Ann Shippey and me, and they're the best salespeople ever, first of all, I have to say. Like, I bought so much Korean skincare and ginseng, but we go through this, and they're explaining what it can do and the fact that this black Korean ginseng, they don't export. You can only get it from this place, and once you buy it there, then you're on the list, so you can have it shipped. And so now you've taken it away from us, so now we have to have it. It's like, so we buy literally $4,000 worth of Korean ginseng. But here's what's crazy. They're telling my husband how it helps with erections, which, of course, now I'm like going, now we're going to have like $10,000 of Korean ginseng. That was probably why we bought it. But the wild thing is, yes, that it definitely does work for that. But here's the crazier thing, and I didn't put it together till I was hearing Chris Shade at A4M last year. And Chris Shade was talking about hormone receptor sensitivity. Now, I'd always thought about that with insulin, but I'd never really thought about it with sex hormones. And he was talking about all these different supplements you could use to improve hormone receptor sensitivity so that you wouldn't need to take as much of whatever you were taking, right? And what had happened for me was I actually had to lower my dose of estrogen, and I couldn't figure out why. And then all of a sudden I went, oh, the ginseng is working like it. So I think this is one of the greatest things ever is ginseng. So that's another one that I'm absolutely keen on and don't leave home without.
JJ, you're very big on measurement. Like people need to measure themselves, not weigh themselves, but mostly DEXA, I guess.
Well, bioimpedance, because DEXA you're only going to get done once or twice a year. Well, how would you know otherwise, Like, case in point, my husband has been athletic his whole life. And a couple years ago, I scheduled us to go in and get a DEXA scan. He'd never done one. I'd been doing them for years, but I hadn't done one since 39. Now I was 59. And we go in to do these DEXAs. And my DEXA scan, my body fat, my weight were exactly the same from 39 to 59, which is unusual. His DEXA scan for an athletic guy, always works out, eats healthy. Now, I was like thought he could work out harder and eat a little bit better, but, I'm not saying anything. His DEXA was 27% body fat. That is crazy high for an athletic male. I expected him to be about 12%. And the cool thing that happened because of that, because how else would you know what your weight is made up of? And even if you have a sense of that, you also want to know how much visceral adipose tissue you have, which is what you're going to see from a DEXA. Now, you can do a waist measurement at home to monitor at home. You can do bioimpedance at home as a way to monitor, which I highly recommend. Don't use a scale. It doesn't tell you anything. You have to use a bioimpedance scale so that you can track total body water, which is a proxy for your fat-free mass, so you can really see if things are changing. Because of your fat-free mass, the big thing that's obviously going to change is your skeletal muscle. You're not going to go, wow, I put on 3 pounds of bone. It's not going to happen. So, it's super helpful, but how else would you know unless you really looked? You might be like my husband, where I was like, I couldn't believe that his body fat was as high as it was. I knew he wasn't super lean, but I didn't think he was that far off the mark. And because of that, he got really fired up, and we tweaked his routine, and literally he went from 25% body fat down to 10% body fat in the course of 8 months, by the way, and dropped 27 pounds of fat, put on 24 pounds of muscle. It was a wild. He also added testosterone in, which it would have been interesting to do without testosterone, because I think maybe would have gotten 12 to 14 pounds of muscle on, but that helped. So you have to know what your weight's made up of in order to be able to, because what if you start lifting weights and you are, doing maybe mild caloric restriction, or not even, you just start swap your diet, you keep your calories the same, but you eat more protein, eat a lot less fat and carbs. You now add in some activity, so you're adding in some resistance training, maybe you're making sure you're getting in that HIIT training a couple times a week, and you're moving more. And you look and you go, gosh, I've been doing this for 6 months, but my weight's exactly the same. Well, the reality is you've lost fat, you've put on muscle. And I had a client who literally over the course of a year dropped 10 pounds of fat and put on 10 pounds of muscle, and went from 25% body fat to 18% body fat. And had we not tracked it on a bioimpedance scale, she would have been like nothing happened.
The same thing happened to me. And I have InBody 570 at home. And I knew my weight. And when I started to all these really heavy training and high protein diet, it was June, I guess. And I was 122 pounds. And then I'm now 128 pounds, but I know it's more muscle. I mean, my fat is so low now, and I would freak out if it was just the scale. I would say, oh my God, right. I put on so much weight.
I mean, and you have to see this in your clothes.
Yeah, of course. But, just seeing there, it would freak me out probably. I did the DEXA scan when in Austin. At the conference, there were the DEXA scan thing over there. And my body fat level was really good, but I thought I was muscly, and it was only in the normal range. Then I started oh my God, I thought I see the muscle, but apparently it wasn't enough.
Well, I mean, you've made a big transformation.
Yeah, I did. You know what happened? Let me tell you. I have osteoporosis on my spine. And Dr. Elizabeth Yurth, she's called the GOAT in the regenerative medicine. She's my doctor. She says, listen, your bones are 30% empty in your spine. You will break it. So she put me on anabolic steroid nandrolone. Oh my God, that thing just and I was really heavily training. My osteoporosis turned back into osteopenia. And I'm muscly now, and I'm really low fat, so I'm really liking it. I was telling her, I said, I'm getting very muscly. What happened is I misread the measurement. I took a little bit too much, and she goes I like how you look. I should maybe take that much of it as well. But
wow,
yeah, but it really did work. I'm liking it now. I'm able to do the pull-ups and stuff, so I became very, very strong.
Are you doing overhead presses standing?
No.
That's my favorite. So overhead dumbbell presses, when you have osteoporosis of the spine, if you think about it, doing an overhead press just loads your spine. Stand up and do it. I mean, don't stand up now.
No.
But stand. Yeah, no. But I mean, at the gym, don't do it seated. Do it standing. And then also do a bar loaded squat.
Oh, yeah, I do that. Overhead, like a shoulder press, kind of, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do them. But
just make sure you're doing it standing.
I started also doing these crazy things that I never did in my life, like 6 rep, 80%.
Nice.
I'm like,
so good.
I'm loving it. It's so fun. Now I don't like the running and stuff. I'm like, oh.
I know, right? That's what, like, once you get into this, you're like, why did I do all this cardio? It's so awful. I think of all the years in my 20s and it was funny because I was never as lean as now, wasn't as muscular. I had this time in my 20s when I was like a low-fat vegetarian and then a vegan. And I'm naturally much more muscular and lean, and that was the only time that I wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really sad, like, I mean, sad meaning people don't need to be like me or like you, but, this exercise choice, just doing yoga or Pilates or just walking, I have so many people around me with osteoporosis or osteopenia that they're heading to osteoporosis, and they're like, they don't care about the strength training. What would be your message to women over 40? Because everything started going downward after 40.
You've heard the latest research that we really age in spurts, not steady state. And, we start losing it around 30, but it really, I think you start to notice it in your 40s, and apparently it starts to double in your 60s. Mm. And the thing is, I like the messaging that Dr. Peter Attia talks about, where he talks about the centenarian decathlon. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you can start to go, what is it that I want to be able to do in my 70s and my 80s and my 90s? Not these ridiculous things of like, I'm going to live to 180. No, I mean, come on. What do you want to be able to do in your 90s? And I love to travel, and I travel very heavy. I do not travel light. I bring a lot of stuff with me wherever I go. So does my husband. So, like, he can only help so much. Literally, we'll have 4 suitcases that weigh 70 pounds each and 2 carry-ons that weigh even more than that. And it's every man for themselves. So I have to be able to hoist this stuff. And I'm not going to stop traveling. So I look at this and go, I better be able to throw a 50-pound plus bag up in the overhead, right? I got to be able to do that. I got to be able to jam up suitcases onto a train or onto a bus and put them on So you got to be able to do this stuff, which means I got to be able to do snatches and kettlebell swings and jumps and things like that. I don't want to ever have to call my husband to get off the toilet or go, I want to be able to do all this stuff. So what I would say is, you got to train for those things now. Mm-hmm. That's the key takeaway. Like, there's no white knight coming to save you here. No one's coming. You got to be able to do this stuff yourself.
So if there are 5 movements that you would suggest, like if you don't do anything, just try to do this 5 thing, like every day or every other day. You don't have time.
Make time. Well, here, I don't know if you've seen the latest research. This was a study looking at VILPA, vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity. And what they looked at was they compared a group that was doing 4.5 to 10 minutes of this a day versus a group doing nothing. Mm-hmm. No VILPA. So VILPA versus no VILPA. And this was done in 1 to 2 minute bursts. And it could be as simple as air squats, running upstairs, jumping jacks, right? 1 to 2 minute bursts. And the people that did these 4.5 to 10 minutes a day in 1 to 2 minute bursts had a 40 to 50% reduction in all-cause mortality and death from heart disease and cancer. So, at the very least, these things I'm going to talk about, you could do these things. And to me, a squat, hugely important. A push-up, a pull-up or a flexed arm hang, an overhead press, because of the very reason I told you about, you're loading your spine, and a deadlift or a bent over row. That would be it. Do those things. And do those things like you could do, one day you could VILPA your push-ups, and your overhead presses. The next day you could VILPA your squats and your deadlifts. So you could easily do these things all throughout the week and just do them in small bursts.
I can hear people saying, like, how about the core?
So I don't even bother with that. You know why? Like I'll occasionally throw it in if I'm recovering at the gym from something else.
Recovering, you're killing me. Recoverings are the moves.
Yeah. The reality is when I do push-ups, like I did push-ups today on a power plate, of course my core is working. I did bent over rows. Of course my core was working, right? So I did up downs. My core had to work. So you look at it and go, if you are doing these functional movements, your core is involved in all of it, which my core, I'm nowhere in my daily life do I lie on the floor and crunch. Like that's never something I do in my activities, of daily living. But I have to hold my core in to squat. So I look at how do I use my core in a way that's functional, which would be like a push-up.
With one last information, let's say how much protein one should eat a day.
I base it on your target body weight. If you are less active, you actually probably need more. As we age, we become more anabolic resistant. And I think that a lot of that probably has to do with the people who are more sedentary. Like a lot of these statistics are more sedentary stats. If you're more active, you've got more muscle. You would think you'd need more, but the reality is you probably need a little less. So it's 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. However, I think it's really important, for me, kind of a health insurance is to take some essential amino acids, to take like 15 grams of essential amino acids a day. And if I had someone who was sarcopenic or osteopenic, I would have them doing that like probably twice a day. And it's a great way to make sure, let's say that someone's eating more of a plant-based diet and it's going to be low in things like methionine. Well, I know if I give them their essential aminos, they won't have any rate-limiting problems of not having enough of something. So it'll help them get what they need. So that's where I use essential aminos to kind of fill in those gaps.
So one needs to target their target body weight. So not like if they're, let's say, 200 pounds and they want to be 180 pounds, so they will target 180 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get really scientific, you would base it on your skeletal muscle, but it's like just too hard. And I really think the easiest thing is just go, it's basically a gram per pound of target body weight. That's it. Super simple.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing conversation. I was so looking forward for that. Thank you for your time.
Well, I'll see you soon.
Hopefully next week.
I'll see you soon and bring you my Sheatine. It's called Sheatine because it's creatine for women.